Another government agency is now targeting Elon. This is a little bit complicated, but let me explain. On Tuesday, the FCC rejected Starlink's application for $900 million in subsidies for rural broadband. Starlink originally won these back in 2020 when they agreed to provide high-speed internet to 640,000 rural homes across 35 states. Yes, the government is paying for expanding broadband services in rural areas. And Starlink, obviously, is perfect for that. It's actually the only solution for this, really. The FCC found that Starlink, quote, had failed to meet its burden to be entitled to those funds. And here's the quote: FCC has a responsibility to be a good steward of limited public funds meant to expand access to rural broadband, not fund applicants that fail to meet basic program requirements. One of the FCC's commissioners dissented from the agency's decision, and he did not hold back. Last year, this is a quote, after Elon acquired Twitter, President Biden gave federal agencies a green light to go after him. Today's decision certainly fits the Biden administration's pattern of regulatory harassment. This is a decision that cannot be explained by any objective application of law, facts, or policy. Instead of applying the traditional FCC standards to the record evidence, which would have compelled the agency to confirm Starlink's $885 million award, the FCC denied it on the grounds that Starlink is not providing high-speed internet service to all these locations today. As noted, the FCC's milestone does not kick in until 2025. Let me toss to you, Sachs. Thoughts on the Biden hit squad going after E?
I mean, I can't remember anything quite like this. This is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you have a sitting member of the FCC telling us that the FCC is engaging in political retaliation. He sits on the board of the 5 commissioners of the FCC. They just canceled an $885 million contract to Starlink. What was that contract for? To provide rural internet service. Starlink is the only company that has that capability today. It's the only one that has that capability if you look forward a few years. It is by far the best at providing broadband from space, which is the best way to get into these rural areas. So what did the commission do? Well, they cherry-picked. They took speed test snapshots from 2 cherry-picked moments in time. And so even that probably was not an accurate reflection of where Starlink is today. But they then said, based on those snapshots, that Starlink would not be able to meet the standards in 3 years. So remember, the requirements that they're saying that Starlink violated don't even have to be met for 3 years. So somehow they're saying that Starlink will not get there in 3 years. They're preemptively judging the service to meet a standard that is not even required to meet today. And nobody else is even close to meeting the standard. So Elon's response to this was, guys, okay, if you're going to cancel the contract for us, like, just save the money, because the competitors that you're giving it to have even less of a service than we do.
Yeah.
So just like save the taxpayer the money. But they're not doing that. So this is really remarkable. And what Carr said here is that the Biden administration is choosing to prioritize its political and ideological goals at the expense of connecting Americans. We can and should reverse course. This is now part of a pattern of the federal government harassing Elon and his companies. And it all stems from Biden at that press conference saying, we got to look at this guy. You know, like Tony Soprano, yeah, we got to look at this guy, you know, whatever. I mean, it was like, and so since
that's a nice restaurant you got there. It'd be terrible if anything ever happened to it.
Yeah, Jake, how you do the impression? Windows. I can't do it. In any event, so Biden says at this press conference, we got to look at this guy. And since then, they've investigated Tesla for supposedly building a glass house, which I didn't know was a crime. That's amazing.
Yeah.
SpaceX, which is partially a defense contractor, was sued by the DOJ because they were hiring too many Americans and they weren't hiring enough refugees into sensitive national security roles that they would surely be sued for doing if they went the other way.
Yeah.
And now they've canceled a contract for SpaceX, having the best service in the space, but somehow missing a goal that they're not required to meet for 3 years. This is harassment. It's transparent.
It's harassment. Yeah.
And the question I have is, do we want to live in a country where the government can engage in this kind of naked political retaliation against its critics? And I have to say, you know, there was a time in America where, you know, Nixon was roundly attacked for having this quote unquote enemies list, where supposedly, you know, he had made a list of all his enemies and the IRS was auditing them. Okay. We are so far beyond that point, and the media isn't interested at all. And no one's really interested unless you like what Elon's doing. But if you don't, you know, if you're on the opposite side of the political spectrum as Elon, you don't care. And there's nobody who's willing to say in a neutral way that political retaliation should not be part of our system. The action is being taken by the Biden administration. They've now weaponized multiple federal agencies to go after Elon on these cases that seem transparently trumped up a glass house, not hiring enough refugees to national security roles.
It's obvious what's happening.
Canceling
here.
a contract for Starlink, which is by far the best rural internet service. How do you even justify it? These cases on their face
I'm not justifying. I'm in 100%. I'm in 100% agreement.
You think this is politically motivated harassment of Elon by the Biden administration?
100%. He said it. And he didn't invite him to the EV summit. So you just take Biden at his actions. If you don't invite Elon to the EV summit, it's obvious that he's got it in for this guy. And now it's obvious he's told people to, investigate him and harass him. It's obvious.
So why do you think they don't like him? Why do you think Biden doesn't like him?
Why doesn't Biden like him? Because he's non-union. It's obvious. That's the beginning and end of it.
It's the union
I'm sure the freedom of speech things and Twitter doesn't help, but this predates. Biden is a union guy, and he will not have non-union people. He will not support non-union people. He is bought and sold by the unions. That's 100%. And Elon said that.
That may be how it started, but I think you're underrating the free speech aspect.
Oh, I said it could have to do with that, but it's definitely, that's the number one issue.
And more importantly, you're saying enabling dissenting voices, strongly dissenting voices, right?
Absolutely. I think that from the get-go, they have sought to exercise control over the Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X platform, because it is the town square for political speech in America.
Succeeded. They succeeded. The FBI, everybody
they had total
it.
control of it until Elon somehow bought the company, which was not in their plans. Frankly, that was just a fluke. I mean, that was something that Elon did out of the blue because he cares a lot about free speech. And he opened up the Twitter jails and, stopped the censorship and opened up the Twitter files. And we found out that this was not just a private company acting on its own. It was being directed or encouraged by
they were giving him lists of tweets. Government. They were giving him lists of tweets saying, hey, these tweets probably violate your terms of service. Yeah.
And the FBI acting as the quote unquote belly button of the whole federal government, directing all these takedown requests, totally un-American.
I think that the pattern of actions, more than anything, mandates that Biden and his team actually have to address publicly why it is not retribution. The absence of doing that at this point is going to be more damaging to them than just letting things go on and claiming down the road, hey, this is all part of the normal course of business. Now, the guy does.
Why would they address it? Why do they have to address it? The media doesn't hold him accountable. The media doesn't report it. The media pretended like the Twitter files never even happened. Remember that? Zero mainstream media coverage of the Twitter files. Zero mainstream media coverage of these retaliatory lawsuits. Why would the Biden administration need to explain itself? Why would they even talk about it? The fix is in.
Well, I mean, now the question is being, I think...
The mainstream media are stenographers for one side of the political spectrum, which is precisely the reason.
Did you guys see this thing?
Hold on, it's precisely the reason why they're so upset with Elon with opening up free speech on Twitter, because they had total control of the public discourse until he did that.
I saw a list of all of the organizations investigating Elon, and what was surprising was how broad some of these organizations felt that they had a mandate to look into him. So there was like, I want to say, Nick, maybe you can find this on Twitter, but they had a list of them, and it was like the Bureau of Land Management had an investigation. I mean, it just makes no sense. Like, it just does not smell right.
Let's pull up this quote from Brendan Carr, who's the FCC commissioner. I thought this was amazing.
This list is incredible.
This is the FCC commissioner. He said the DOJ, FAA, FTC, NLRB, SDNY, and FWS, I guess that's Fish and Wildlife, have all taken action. The FCC now joins them. Man.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a little bit nuts.
Look at that Biden quote, where I didn't actually know about the second part. I knew about the first part where he says, we got to take a look at this guy. But then he was asked how. And President Biden responded, there's a lot of ways.
There's a lot of
you know what else he said that?
There's a lot of ways to get to somebody.
Yeah, it's like Tony Soprano. He's well beyond where other people are in his industry in terms of innovation. He's the first to acknowledge, because I've heard him say this many times, that he's in highly regulated industries and they've got, massive compliance programs at Tesla and SpaceX and all these different companies. What we're judging these regulatory agencies on is not that there's a need to regulate Elon's companies within the framework of their industries, but rather the specific actions that are being brought. Remember, DOJ suing SpaceX for not hiring enough refugees.
Right.
Tesla being sued on this glass house business, whatever that is.
Right.
And now
those are voluntary actions, in a sense.
FCC canceling a contract.
Yeah.
3
the actions
years
speak volumes. The actions speak volumes,
exactly. 3 years before they even need to judge that contract, whether that contract's been met.